People always ask me, did you really write this book? Or did somebody help you? I said, nobody helped me. The women characters are more creative in what they do. So the caste became stronger. As the village developed, the idea of caste to me became stronger, and that is when that whole thing happened of what they were ayas. Those books will come, there will be AI generated books, but countries are trying to bring out copyrights to clearly indicate which is AI generated.
Welcome back. Today we have our author Kavery Nambisan ma'am. In the previous episode she was sharing her experience of being an author and a medical professional. She's back with her stories. Welcome madam. So talking about one of your first books, that is The Truth About Bharat. You have this young rebellious boy who runs away from a medical college, and all kinds of adventures happen after that. This is one book which is interestingly written from a male perspective, which is very rare. A woman writer writing from a male perspective and all that. We have books, but it is very rare. So later on you have all the books written from a female perspective. Most of your books are female centered, the gender boundaries that exist in our society and all that. So what was the change that you felt by writing a book on male perspective and then transgressing that boundary?
No, I didn't have any intention of anything. I just thought of this story of Bharat, and I just found it interesting to write about this boy, 19-year-old boy. And having decided to write about him, and I said, okay, I'll do in first person. It was like a challenge to myself that can I think like a boy?
Okay.
Can I do that? So I tried to remember what the boys' conversation is like, male conversation is like, which I have heard. So it was an interesting thing to do, and I enjoyed writing that, and I wrote it very fast. It was a short novel, and it was very popular. But people always ask me, did you really write this book? Or did somebody help you? I said, nobody helped me. I just remembered certain conversations I've heard or certain incidents that have happened, and then I imagined the rest, So I love doing that, but I do, although most of my protagonists are female, but I do try to create real male characters. I take as much trouble creating the character of a male as I do with a female, because I feel the writer's role is to, while writing, to stay above gender, not to be sort of too conscious of your gender. Because then how are you going to talk about the man? You might always think from a position of the female and saying, oh, this is what happens, and you often you get victimized in your mind, and you write about that. But that's not, I feel for a writer that's not enough, because you've got to understand the other gender. And the reason I wrote one of the things in Rising Suns, where the protagonists are male really in this, the important characters are all male. But if you see deep, and people do sometimes ask why we got male protagonists, why is it Rising Suns?
Where are
why
the
is
daughters?
it Rising Suns? But then if you look carefully and you read the book, you find that there are women characters who are very strong, and they have very individual, they make individual choices. The
very independent,
There is Gauru, and then there's Chinni. There is that old lady Muduki. Then even
Chinni is the adopted girl.
Yes,
the
that one.
Yeah.
And even Vaidehi, they all make their own choices, whether good or bad. And there is, I feel, actually, I was talking to somebody like this at an interview, and when she brought it out, she said, the women characters are more creative in what they do, because men have everything sort of set for them, in the sense their mind is conditioned to the fact that they have to have a job. They have to learn so that they must get a job, they must earn, they must look after the family. Everything comes one after the other in a sequence. While for a woman it can be, especially in today's context, but for a long time, there have been so many challenges. From the time a girl is born, the challenges are different to those of boys. And either you can follow the confirmed path you know, and conform to everything that society might expect of you, or you might decide to do something else. And women are better at being creative with doing something else, especially when they are faced with an obstacle. You know, how they negotiate these obstacles and choose you know, alternatives which are often very different. And if you really look at people's lives, if you look at certain women leaders, or women who have, when I say leaders, I mean pioneers, say like Aruna Roy, Medha Patkar, or I mean there are so many of them whom we can think of, who have you know, somehow chosen a very brave, a different path, and not particularly tried. It doesn't mean that you try to follow what the man has done and that is success. No, I don't mean that. But they do it in creative ways, which are very different, depending on their passion. And that is quite appealing to me. So I really try to, I feel if you want to understand women's problems well, you have to understand men. So Rising Suns is about understanding men also. You know.
Now, coming to Rising Suns, your latest book, which I think is doing great, right? It is already being loved by everyone, and I love the way the novel is being structured. It's almost epic in its proportions. You have 4 parts, and each of these parts bring, and it just at a very crucial part, it just becomes. I don't want to give any spoilers to the audience, so you have that scene is very interesting. But I want to ask something else about the book. The book has got this underlying level of what you call casteism, and you know, at a time when everywhere, you know, you find polarization happening. You know, nobody wants to speak about caste in open spaces. It is something that is always brushed in, you know, swept inside the carpet, but it's always there. Did you feel that, you know, why should I write a book which talks about caste? What is your take on that?
When I started the book, I had no intention of writing about caste. I was writing, really, I was thinking in terms of family, and in a rural area in Karnataka, and then
a fictional village. Kesaraghattu
is a fictional village,
yes.
Very similar to a lot of villages. It's very similar, and so you could, you know, in that sense, it's based on all real things, most of it. But and that the story going from the village as it comes, and then I understood, like I had to understand the village. Having created a village, you can think of Malgudi or something, you know, like that. So you created a village, now you have to make it real, and in your mind you're creating all the characters, like the tribals, the Brahmins, the various other people, you know, the Muslims, so many are there in that area. You're creating all these people. And then I was thinking,
they're very caste conscious people in the novel.
But villagers, villagers were like that. Villagers were like that, and often they're still like that in many parts of India. And this was the 1920s. It was not now, you know, it was early, and so it was much more rigid, much more rigid. And you think of, like I was wondering, like for instance, to come to a scene in the book where this Kuppu, the dog, you know, does what it does, and gets punished for it. That how far do we go with our sacred symbols? You know, we have certain things we consider sacred in each religion and or each place, and when somebody who doesn't know much about it, like a dog or a little girl, transgresses, you know, breaks that boundary, does something, then what do you do? Do you punish, and how harsh should the punishment be? So that is a thing I was actually questioning myself. You know, when you look at community or people, you look at yourself. How would you, you know, why does this person punish, you know, in the way he does, or whatever? And so the caste became stronger as the village developed. The idea of caste to me became stronger, and that is when that whole thing happened of what Devaraya's life is unfolds. You know, that was not there in the beginning at all in my mind, but that whole thing came to my mind much later about caste. And then of course it goes on, and he has to create his previous thing, everything, you know, it's like it has to create. So that's how it flowed. Also, but being there from the 1920s onwards, I knew it was the freedom struggle, and I wanted to see what the freedom struggle meant to southern India, because we read a lot about the north. Everything takes place in the north, and we really know a lot about it, and they were the ones who faced the actual thing during partition, and we hear of that. But the freedom struggle itself, the leaders, the people who fought, came from all over India, and majority of them came from small villages, because all of India was villages. You know, there were few cities. So majority of them came from small places, and then they went and they, you know, moved, and then they went, of course, ended up wherever.
Your father was also a freedom fighter.
Yes, my
so
father
you must have a lot of memories or maybe anecdotes that were being narrated to you about that.
Yes.
So all that has gone into this book, right?
Yes, definitely, a lot of that. So I was conscious of what was happening in southern India because of my father and various people he related to, and then hearing stories, and also being interested in the fact that when I was young, and I have seen over the years, and when the government formed and so on, so many of the leaders, they all came from different parts of India, you know. Everybody, Mahatma Gandhi came from somewhere, then there was Govind Vallabh Pant, there was Tilak, there was Gokhale, there were so many, they came from all over. You know, there was
India.
They were from all over. Kamraj, you know, from the south, Nambudripad, all over. But you had different, and how different parties formed. So I found it fascinating when I thought of it more in a family sense, a personal meaning, not my personal, but of an individual family and its people getting drawn into this fantastic struggle, which was calling you, asking you to fight the oppressor, the colonial rule, with non-violence. I mean, that was it was a unique idea. Nowhere in the world had anyone talked of using non-violence to get rid of the aggressors' oppression, and they succeeded. You know, and then there were opposing points of view. You know, they were the opposing points of view, and how they all, but in the end, they wanted the freedom. So all that is quite, when you look at it from the viewpoint of single persons, it becomes much more interesting and much more, in my sense, in my mind, important. And to me, one of the important times is between 1946 and 49, when the Constituent Assembly was formed. And they had, by 1946, the British had decided to hand over, and that process was to go on, and partition was going to happen, and they knew about it, and the violence started. And the violence was incredibly big. It was the worst ever in world history, the number of people who died. And in the middle of all that, these people, the Constituent Assembly consisted of 300 people, 299 actually, and my father was one of them, actually, the youngest. And they decided that they have to make a constitution to enact the laws for the government to think of the future, you know. So they had to study, to write it with a view to the future, and that was a time of extreme violence all around them. So you think of these people having that, I don't know what to call it, the focus and the stillness and the wisdom to think about each and if you read the Constitution, every detail of your life is there, what to do when. You know, the rules that the government must follow, the law must follow, everything is there. So how did they sit and do it? For 3 years they did it. And but in the midst of all this violence, all of them would have faced something in their family that was sad because of the partition. You know, families were torn, people had to migrate, they lost their land, so many things happened, they lost their friends. So in the middle of all that, they did
even now the shadow of that that lingers.
So these people had to keep their thing, you know, to courage to make it a good one for the future generations, not thinking of only those years. That I thought was a very remarkable thing that happened, and we are all the inheritors of the Constitution. No?
And we must safeguard it with.
Yes, definitely. So those ideas, and I don't want to talk about it, my book never talks of politics or of caste, but they remain characters.
Talks about
they become characters in the novel, more or less.
That's it.
They become caste and politics become characters because they are in the background. They are there.
Okay. Now, ma'am, you started writing at a time when there was no internet, or that internet boom was just happening. You have waded through a lot of technological advancements, and now you are here at a time when AI is making almost writing books, making films, acting in films and so on. So how do you look at all these technological innovations that have taken place in the literary field? How do you place writers in that, and how do you look at all these changes, and how do you adapt to all this? Because you have brought out a book in 2025, whereas you started way back in 1986. So how do you look at this journey?
I think, see, for us, early writing was always, I mean, I did a lot of my writing by hand first, and then typed it and then sent it. You sent it by post to the publishers. Yeah, that's how we did, and that went on for a long time, and then we changed to computers. But yes, the AI coming, and that is recent, and it, so far I have not been affected by it, but I have read books which are AI produced and things that are AI produced. And while AI, I'm sure, is good for certain documentation, verification, facts, stating of facts or learning facts, it is good. But I think for creative writing, you need the human mind.
Exactly.
You know, they say that no, even AI can even create. Of course, it can take from everywhere and create, but it's still not the same.
It looks very artificial.
It is not the same. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I believe, because in other countries, what they have done, there are worries about this, that people will not know whether AI wrote it or a person wrote it, and you can write anything, create anything. Those books will come, there will be AI generated books, but countries are trying to bring out copyrights to clearly indicate which is AI generated and which is human generated.
Okay.
They are going to do that. They want to do that. That is the law they want to bring in, that you cannot produce an AI book and put it alongside another book and say these are both similar, written by so and so. You have to say that AI, it is supported by AI or combination, whatever it is, you have to mention that you have taken the help of AI.
Okay.
AI. That's what they
and
want
also,
to do.
you know, most I think with the exception of 1 or 2 books, all your books have been published by Penguin. The publishing scenario has changed. You have writers making themselves available everywhere, promoting their books, and also talking about their books in such a way that they expect the readers to read in a particular way. So there is so much of interference from the part of the writers these days. I'm also talking about all these literature festivals and all, where they will be talking about their books, and so the readers are finding, some of the readers will be finding it very stifling, because the writers are breathing down their necks with their own opinions. So how do you look at this scenario? Do you find this okay, or do you think it is an alarming tendency?
I don't know what it is. I mean, alarming, I don't know, but it's, if people want it, it will happen, you see. It's like a great flood or a surge that's coming, and people are not resisting, it will go on and on and on. So it is there are advantages of a certain type, maybe for publishers. I think for publishers to be able to sell their books, and maybe it is a way of projecting their authors. But for the authors themselves, at least some of us, at least for me, it is a very difficult thing to do. Very, very difficult to promote. Writing a book is tough enough, but it is what you want to do. But I always hoped that once I wrote it and the publisher took it, my job was over, you know. But then now we are made to work, you know, go to different places, and so it is
in
hard.
one way it is nice, because you interact with your
you
readers,
interact.
right?
I think you could, if I had the opportunity to do a literature festival or talk about it in some way, I would do it differently, much smaller and more intimate, and have discussions which are worthwhile, that people feel like listening to, not have so many venues where you jump from one you know, you listen half to one speaker, then you go somewhere else, listen to another one, because there are so many different, talks going on at the same time, and then you have to call celebrities, all this, and you know, lots of money splash. I think it could have been very much simpler, you know.
I think in Karnataka there is a share of very small literature festivals like Book Brahma, Sadish Chepparike is organizing one like that, which is very, it's a very intimate affair. Correct. I heard.
Those, in fact, the earliest thing when Sahitya Academy used to arrange a fairly good, it was not called a literature festival, but a literary conference.
Okay, literary conference.
But those were well
that
done.
That is Indian literature.
Indian literature.
Sahitya Academy is publication.
From Delhi. It would be in Delhi. Most of the time it was in Delhi, then it moved to different big cities. But in those days they were nice, because they really took trouble to have not that number of people, very few. And I remember going, and we stayed in some very, very simple dorm-like rooms, you know. They were so simple, but that's all you need, actually, you know. But we met and we talked to each other. It was really nice, and listened to some really good old-time writers whom we met. So I am in favor of small conferences, I would say. I don't know why we started calling it festival in the first place. Don't you think? It's a very strange word to use, festival.
Because multiple things are happening in a festival.
And it becomes so, when you call it festival, it becomes a festival. There's Nach, Gana, everything goes on. No?
But one thing is there, it keeps alive the spirit of reading and discussion and all that. That's all there.
There is the advantage, because I saw in Jaipur Literary Festival, when I went to the bookshop, it was packed with people. The bookshop completely, you couldn't walk, and they were not just there; they were buying books. People were going with armful of books. So that was a good thing to see. That they, you know, at the end of the thing, some people are buying.
Many of them are buying, but very few will be reading.
That I don't know.
So, you know, as a writer, you must have read a lot, because that is your writing. And the choice of your words, the construction of your sentences, you know, there is a clear indication that you have read a lot. So, who are your literary inspirations? Who are your favorite authors?
And again, I have so many. But the ones I am very fond of, one is Kipling. I'm very fond of Kipling. I read whatever I can of his, and I love his short stories besides the bigger ones like Kim and Jungle Book, all of them. But I love his short stories. There's such a variety, and such, I mean, his way of using language is still, and his observation of Indian life, that is remarkable. And the empathy with which he wrote, you know, though people call him a racist, he was never
they call him a white man's burden and all that.
I mean, he did talk of those things. He was talking of a certain time when he was young, certainly. But no, he had a lot of empathy for the Indian. If you read his characters, you can see that. I find him a remarkable writer, and I am very much influenced, I think, in the terms of the novel writing by the Russian writers. Dostoevsky, Gogol, Gorky, Tolstoy, all of them. I love reading them. I've read a few Japanese, but I do like some of the Japanese stories. Some of them, not all, but I do like them. From anywhere, from India, my favorites are. I mean, whether it is translated or English, I think of the merit of the story. For me, it doesn't matter which language. If the story is good, then that's the, you know, that way. I'm very fond of Girish Karnad's plays. In Malayalam, I like Muhammad Bashir. And
eternal favorite.
Yes, I love reading him. In fact, I picked up yesterday from Modern Bookstore, which is again a wonderful place, like a you know, huge treasure house of books. I just loved it, loved seeing them. So they gave me, I was able to get 3 of Bashir's books, which I have at home, but I can't find them. You know, because I got so many books, sometimes I lose my books. So I got 3 of them, and Vasudevan Nair I like N.S. Madhavan. They're all my favorites. I Upamanyu Chatterjee. So I have Naipaul's House for Mr. Biswas, one
Biswas,
of the books
okay.
I love. So
Okay.
it is never ending.
It's a wide variety of writers.
Yes, I do read. I read all types. I read humor, I read thrillers.
I also read that you have stood up for Salman Rushdie. When he was nominated for the Nobel Prize Literature, he said, especially after his attack, no. So you also stand for other fellow writers also. That's a great thing.
For me, it's not Salman Rushdie or anybody. I go by the merit. I feel writing and reading is such an important thing, that a gift that humanity has got, to have language, to have words, and to have the ability to communicate with each other through words, which are so beautiful. I feel it's a wonderful gift, and I feel whatever can propagate it. So where there is merit, whether it's Rushdie, whether it's whoever it is, I'm for. To acknowledge them, that we should acknowledge them. Just like we revere a scientist, I think we should revere our writers. I really mean that, because I care for the word. I care for languages.
Okay.
Yes, that's one way in which we can communicate with each other, what we are doing now.
Yeah. So what are your future projects like?
Future projects,
Secret.
of course. Now I am writing a novel.
Okay.
Yes, but it will be very different from Rising Suns.
So all the best for that. So it was nice talking to author Kavery Nambisan. So she was grateful enough to spare her time for the audience, and she was talking about her book. She was also talking about her profession as a doctor, and it was such a delightful conversation. Thank you so much, madam, for coming over here and gracing us with your presence. Thank you so much.
Thank you.